He told me that she wouldn't see her 20th birthday.
And I said, what can we do? And he said, nothing.
That's when the panic really struck me.
My biggest fear is that I'm going to lose my wife.
Jim never left Mandy's side. He would lose his best friend.
Next, two medical mysteries that defied the experts. Since she was a toddler, Tiffany House has been slowly losing the ability to move. And when a terrifying incident nearly cost the 7-year-old her life, Tiffany's parents find themselves facing their worst nightmare.
It was frightening. I was afraid that something was crippling my daughter.
Then, Amanda Gray's seemingly ordinary life is turned completely upside down when a terrifying disease causes her body to begin wasting away.
At that point, I had to go and tell my family that I might not live through this.
When illness strikes, we look to doctors to give us answers. But what if they can't? For these unlucky patients, diagnosis is a mystery. When San Antonio high school sweethearts Randall and Marilyn House married in the summer of 1970, they wasted no time preparing for their new lives together.
We bought our first home, and at that time we started thinking about a family.
But that simple dream would soon turn into an unexpected struggle for the young couple.
We tried for 3 or 4 or 5 years and never was successful at giving birth to a child.
We decided we were going to adopt.
Unfortunately, the road to adoption is not an easy one, and the process takes an enormous toll on both Randall and Marilyn.
You go through an approval process. They come and visit you and decide if they think you're acceptable to raise a child. So it's kind of difficult. It's having somebody come in and look at you.
But then one day in January of 1983, they receive a phone call that changes their lives forever.
They had a young girl. She was the most beautiful thing that we ever saw. We were elated.
We picked her up and took her home, and she was just a precious little baby.
The new parents name their daughter Tiffany and quickly adjust to life as a family of 3.
She was very healthy, very, very beautiful, and it changed our lives almost completely, almost overnight.
Over the next 2 years, Randall and Marilyn add to their family. First, a younger sister for Tiffany, then a brother.
Well, it was wonderful. We had 3 children running around the house, and we had a lot of bonding with our children.
But shortly after Tiffany turns 3, the first sign of trouble appears when, out of the blue, she comes down with an alarming illness.
She seemed to have a little difficulty breathing. She was terribly congested. It often sounded like there was fluid in her throat or in her chest cavities.
We couldn't kick it. We couldn't get over it. So I took her to the doctor. The doctor says, well, she has a cold, and back then they would give you a amoxicillin. We took tons of that stuff.
But as the weeks roll by, Tiffany can't seem to shake the persistent colds.
I remember, having a sore throat, runny nose, and then I'd get congested in my chest. Sometimes it'd get really bad.
It seemed to me there must be something maybe going on that we weren't aware of.
But each time Marilyn takes Tiffany in to see the pediatrician, he repeatedly assures her that the little girl just has a weaker than normal immune system.
When you hear there's nothing wrong, you go a big sigh of relief. Okay, well, there's nothing wrong here then.
Despite Tiffany's recurrent colds, she develops like a seemingly normal toddler. But a few weeks after her 4th birthday, Randall and Marilyn notice an unnerving new development.
She always ran different than other children. She kind of waddled like a duck.
I remember putting her in the yard and trying to teach her to run. I'd say, Tiffany, you have to move fast, and let's move our arms. And she couldn't run. And we thought that was a little strange.
Concerned, Marilyn schedules an appointment with a pediatrician who gives the little girl a thorough head-to-toe exam.
And he would say, well, she's normal, that, she's just developing her motor skills. And I would leave and sigh and think, okay, she's okay.
Still, the Houses are eager to do whatever they can to help Tiffany along. And a few weeks later, her mother settles on a new approach.
We had a little ballet school in the center near our home, and it's kind of a little girl thing to do, so I took her there for lessons.
Marilyn can't wait to see her little ballerina in action. But her enthusiasm is short-lived when she realizes how much of a struggle it is for Tiffany to keep up.
She would fall on the stage. She couldn't bend as easily as the other children. She had difficulty getting up. In a group of 5 or 6, Tiffany would always be the one to trip up.
And the teacher told me that Tiffany seemed to have weak abdominal muscles, that she couldn't do some of the things that the other children did. And that was the first time I'd ever heard anybody say anything like that about her. I was really afraid. We were worried about her, didn't know what to do with her or what was going on.
For the past 3 years, 6-year-old Tiffany House has experienced a rash of severe colds and delays in her basic motor skills. Now Tiffany's struggling in dance class, and her instructor believes she may be suffering from something far more serious. Troubled by this latest development, her mother, Marilyn, makes an appointment with a local neurologist.
We thought that would be a good idea, that maybe we could just run her through a general checkup to see if she was okay.
This one doctor I saw was a neurologist, the typical neurology test that they do. Touch your finger to your nose, bend down, walk down the hall.
But nothing could have prepared Marilyn and Randall for what the doctor has to say.
He determined that, well, she's just weak. She's just weak. There's really nothing wrong that he could find.
I told him, I had concerns that she would fall, that she didn't seem to keep up with other children athletically. And he said that she seemed to him to be normal, within the normal range.
Distraught, the family heads home, unsure about what to do next.
I just wasn't convinced that she would be okay.
It was scary, yeah, especially for my wife, because she was always with Tiffany, and she was very, very concerned about her physical condition.
With each passing day, it seems to Marilyn as if Tiffany is getting worse. And it isn't long before she begins to struggle with simple physical tasks.
The stairs, going up the stairs. She'd pull herself. She'd pull on the banister. She had difficulty. Also, I noticed that Tiffany was like a board. If she bent like this. She didn't arch.
Even taking a trip in their SUV eventually becomes a challenge.
Of course, they're a little bit off the ground. Well, the other kids would jump up on the step and get in. But Tiffany could not get in.
Growing more concerned by the minute, Marilyn's next stop is a pediatric orthopedist.
They did an x-ray in the office, and he saw the spine. There seemed to be a little narrowing, a little difference in the distance between the vertebrae. He just said, this is what seems to be the problem, why she doesn't bend, and that it's probably a congenital abnormality, something that happened at birth, and there was just no solution or nothing to do next. It was just what it was. And I can remember feeling a great sense of relief and even crying. Okay, she's, this is okay. She's okay now.
Despite her diagnosis, Tiffany continues to challenge herself. And when she asks to join the swim team, Marilyn couldn't be happier.
Tiffany never was good. She was always the last one, and she always brought up the rear, but she didn't seem like that bothered her.
While Tiffany struggles to keep up with her teammates in the pool, she enjoys the camaraderie and finds solace in the fact that she excels in the classroom.
There's the whole stereotype of, the nerd who's got the glasses and is the avid reader and just isn't good at sports. So I didn't think that there was anything wrong because I was good at school.
But when another seemingly unrelated yet frightening symptom begins to emerge, Tiffany and her parents can't help but sit up and take notice.
Tiffany ate differently than other children. She had difficulty swallowing. She would get choked occasionally.
She had problems with chewing and with swallowing. She'd gag. It took her a long time to eat.
Once again, Marilyn takes Tiffany back in to see a new round of doctors, but each and every one of them assures her that there's nothing wrong with her little girl.
We're worried that there's something there that we can't get pinpointed, that we don't know what to do with her next, that we've been to this doctor and that doctor and you don't know where to go next.
But little does the family know, a single terrifying incident is about to change everything.
We got in the pool. The kids were all splashing around, and Tiffany jumped in the pool. Tiffany was having great difficulty keeping herself above the water, and she just did not have enough strength in her legs to propel herself. And she started going under.
For the past 7 years, Randall and Marilyn House have watched their daughter Tiffany battle chronic colds, struggle to swallow her food, and slowly lose control of her muscles. But the parents can hardly believe their eyes when in the middle of a swim, the 10-year-old suddenly begins to drown.
I jumped in and held onto her and pulled her out of the water. It was frightening. That was a very frightening moment. I was afraid that something was crippling my daughter.
Petrified by the near-death experience, the Houses immediately set up a series of appointments with specialists, hoping that one of them will be able to identify what's causing Tiffany's body to shut down. But once again, they come up empty.
That was a very frustrating point in time. We as parents knew there was something wrong with our daughter.
But just when things seemed darkest for the Houses, Randall's cousin Roy, a pediatrician at the famed Mayo Clinic, pays them a visit. Desperate for some answers, they ask him to examine Tiffany.
He told me to do 3 little things. He said to get on the floor and get up off the floor, to run down a hallway, and to go up and down a flight of stairs.
After observing Tiffany attempt these simple tasks, Roy offers up an observation that shocks Marilyn and Randall to the core. He believes she's suffering from a type of myopathy, a degenerative muscle disease.
You know, you think of people you've seen with muscle diseases, and you think, is this what's going to happen to Tiffany?
Shaken by the possibilities, Marilyn immediately takes Tiffany to Minnesota's Mayo Clinic to meet with pediatric neurologist Dr. Mark Patterson.
She had a history of always having some difficulty keeping up with other children, difficulty with frequent falls, but her parents were concerned that her strength had been deteriorating for about 18 months before I saw her.
After giving Tiffany a rudimentary exam, Dr. Patterson is sure that something is indeed wrong. He promptly orders an electromyogram, or EMG, to determine if the problem is originating in Tiffany's nerves or her muscles.
The first part is to stimulate the nerves electrically and to take a very fine needle and to insert that into the muscle. And by looking at the pattern of electrical activation on the screen of the instrument, it's possible to determine if the problem arises in the nerve or is a primary problem in the muscle.
He stayed with Tiffany and talked to her during the whole thing.
It's an agonizing procedure that Tiffany bravely endures. And when it's over, Dr. Patterson is confident that he's uncovered a significant piece of the puzzle.
The EMG showed changes suggestive of a muscle disease. The next step was to perform a muscle biopsy to obtain a piece of muscle that could be examined under the microscope and also studied with special biochemical tests.
I remember that it was very painful. I remember waking up and it hurt.
Tiffany and Marilyn anxiously wait for the test results. But when the findings come in later that day, Dr. Patterson is blown away by what he sees.
The muscle biopsy showed that the muscle fibers were filled with glycogen.
Glycogen is the storage form of glucose, the body's major energy supply. And if glycogen is not converted into glucose when the body needs it, muscle function is greatly diminished.
In Tiffany's case, there's a deficiency of one of the enzymes which normally breaks down this storage form of glycogen to release glucose for the body's metabolism.
The excess glycogen in the muscle biopsy is the final clue Dr. Patterson needs to make his diagnosis.
Dr. Patterson called us into the office and he said that she has a very rare disease.
The storage of glycogen confirmed the diagnosis of acid maltase deficiency, also known as Pompe disease.
Pompe disease is a neuromuscular genetic disorder caused by a mutation in the gene that makes an enzyme called alpha-glucosidase, or GAA. In healthy patients, the body uses GAA to break down glycogen, a form of sugar used for energy. But in patients like Tiffany, mutations in the gene reduce this essential enzyme. As a result, excessive amounts of glycogen accumulate in the body, causing muscle cells to literally attack themselves.
This storage of the glycogen damages the normal function of the cell so that parts of the cell begin to digest themselves, causing loss of muscle bulk and tissue over time. Ultimately, Pompe disease explained all of Tiffany's problems in early life. Because she couldn't expand her lungs normally, she wasn't able to cough normally to clear her lungs, and so in that situation, anyone is susceptible to infection. Because she wasn't able to generate energy in a normal fashion, and it means that you can't maintain your normal posture, you don't walk in a normal fashion, she couldn't move normally.
In fact, the disease affects almost every muscle in the body, including the esophagus.
There are so-called voluntary muscles involved in swallowing. It becomes difficult to swallow.
But while it's reassuring to finally know what's been causing Tiffany's body to go haywire, the diagnosis is devastating. There is no cure for Pompe disease.
Dr. Patterson said that it is a progressive degenerative muscle disease. And I said, what can we do? And he said, nothing. There is no treatment, there is no cure, you can do nothing. And that she would live to her second decade. And I said, she's in her second decade. You know, what does that leave for us?
"11-year-old Tiffany House has been living with an inexplicable and debilitating disorder for more than 8 years. But now, Dr. Mark Patterson is confident that she's suffering from Pompe disease, an extremely rare and degenerative muscle condition that could take her life at any given moment.
He said, well, you know, I can't tell you that she will live a week or a month, a year. It would just depend on, you know, what the circumstances.
It tends to particularly involve the muscles of respiration, so that progressive weakness of those muscles leads to respiratory failure and, without treatment, to death.
He described the disease to me, that there was no cure for the disease, that it was progressive, and he told me that she wouldn't see her 20th birthday.
There was never a lot of emphasis placed on being told what my diagnosis was. It was just, this is something we have to deal with and find a way to overcome.
The family is completely shattered by the diagnosis. At the same time, they can't help but wonder why it took more than 9 years to uncover it.
This is not a common disease. It's about 1 in 40,000 or so. When you see a child with this sort of weakness, there are often other things that are more common that people would think of. When Tiffany simply seemed to be a little clumsy, had frequent infections, those things are common in young children. And so one wouldn't necessarily consider the possibility of a muscle disease.
Not sure where to turn next, the family heads back to Texas, determined to figure out a way to move on with their lives. But 2 weeks later, Tiffany's condition takes a harrowing nosedive.
She was developing all sorts of rapid problems. You could notice some significant changes in her breathing. She lost the ability to walk.
Sometimes I would have to carry her, and I couldn't, I couldn't do that in all situations. So I had bought a wheelchair, and I had to make her use it. Eventually, after a few fights and stuff, she would use it. And then, of course, she couldn't do without it.
Tiffany's scared to death. We're scared to death. Just having the cold facts presented to you like that, you realize that, life's life's pretty darn short.
Tiffany's fate looks grim, but the Houses refuse to accept a death sentence for their daughter. With their own money, they fund the first medical conference for Pompe disease right in San Antonio.
We brought in 15 or so of the key researchers around the world. That really got things rolling.
Not long afterwards, Tiffany participates in a medical trial with a cutting-edge enzyme replacement therapy designed to allow her body to break down glycogen once again. The results are nothing short of astounding.
It changed my life. I mean, it was a huge change.
She's a lot stronger. It's made a difference in what she can do. She can now, she can bend from the waist, maybe pick up something. There's just everyday things that she wasn't able to do.
The treatment, which she'll be on for the rest of her life, has slowed down Tiffany's muscle degeneration and allowed her to regain her independence. Today, she's still confined to her wheelchair, but the 25-year-old has defied all of her doctor's expectations.
I'm the president of our patient organization. I'm a board member of the International Pompe Association, so that's keeping me pretty busy. I like to spend a lot of time with my niece when I can. She's growing up so fast, and it's really fun to watch.
Currently in her second year of law school, Tiffany continues to beat the odds. When she graduates, she hopes to work as an advocate for the disabled.
She'll make a darn good lawyer. She's already contributed a lot to society, and I know she'll continue that.
I always thought there was something special about Tiffany, and I don't know if that was because she was mine or what, but when we first adopted her, I thought, this kid is pretty special.
It was always, okay, yes, this is what you have, but it was never made to be, this is all that you are. I've learned a lot about perseverance.
While Tiffany House's strength and mobility slowly deteriorated over a period of 9 years, it took less than 4 months for Amanda Gray's body to begin shutting down completely. Amanda had just graduated college when she met Jim Gray in the summer of 2003 at a nightclub in Tampa, Florida.
I was 22, and it was pretty much love at first sight.
The new couple soon finds a house, and Amanda quickly becomes like a second mother to Jim's 5-year-old daughter, Skylar.
I have a daughter from a previous relationship. They hit it off immediately, like two peas in a pod.
In April of 2005, Jim and Amanda marry, and soon after welcome their son James into the family. Just a year later, the young mother gives birth once again to a daughter they name Jaylee.
I definitely always wanted to be a mom. I always wanted to have kids, and, you know, it happened pretty much the way that I would want it to.
Eventually, Amanda quits her job as a medical lab manager to become a full-time mom. She loves spending time with her kids, but soon after Jaylee's birth, she begins to feel unusually run down.
In January of 2008, I felt a lot of fatigue. And at the time, I didn't know if it was that I had 3 kids, and like any other mother, I was just very tired.
Amanda tries to get as much rest as she can, but it isn't long before a mysterious symptom emerges.
It just felt like my joints couldn't move. That they had become so stiff and just almost stone-like. And it was very, very painful to even pick up my children. And it frightened me that I could possibly drop them.
There were times when she would tell me that she had a hard time, you know, opening this or doing that.
Never one to grumble, Amanda does her best to grin and bear it. Until a week later, when she wakes up with an alarming new complaint.
My neck was very, very sore on the left side. It felt very stiff. It hurt to move it, almost like I had sprained it. And when I went to go feel my neck, it had developed swollen lymph nodes.
Not wanting to take any chances, Amanda makes an appointment with her general practitioner for the next day.
She went over my joints to see if there was any swelling and see if it started to affect any other joints in my body, checking the swollen lymph nodes and the nodules in my neck. She was thinking it was mono, so we definitely were listening to the doctor and felt that that's probably what it was.
Mononucleosis, often called the kissing disease, is a virus transmitted through saliva. But there's no specific therapy available, as antibiotics don't work against viral infections.
She gave me anti-inflammatories because she was hoping that that would help. If there was any swelling, that would help ease the pain a little bit.
She certainly didn't want any concern to be relayed to her family. But I think at 27, she was very concerned that this may have been something else.
I think she probably forced herself to get up, you know, and do things and try not to look sick. She doesn't like being the victim.
Over the next few days, Amanda does her best to keep it together. But things soon take a dramatic turn for the worse.
One night I just was feeling really, really bad, and I started to get chills. And so I took my temperature, and at the time it was 101. And probably about 4 hours after that, my fever shot up to 104. And I think that's when the panic really struck.
It's probably one of the scariest moments of my life. I definitely had to monitor. I set an alarm clock for, you know, every 4 hours. I gave her her pills, kept her for about a week fighting that fever, and they just kept saying, you know, it should go away, it should go away. But it didn't.
After 7 days of dangerously high fevers, incapacitating soreness, and strangely swollen lymph nodes, Jim decides it's time for a more drastic course of action.
I made her go to the emergency room. I figured if you're at the emergency room, they're going to test you for more in depth than the doctor would. And I was just scared. I couldn't get there fast enough.
For the past 7 days, Amanda Gray has been suffering from dangerously high fevers. But when they show no sign of breaking, Amanda's husband takes matters into his own hands, rushing her to the nearest hospital.
My fever just got so high that it was hard to do anything. They brought me in pretty fast. They did some more blood work. They did some general chest x-rays to check for pneumonia. And they gave me some acetaminophen to help bring down the fever.
A few hours later, the results of Amanda's blood test come in, and doctors aren't too surprised with the findings.
My diagnosis was lymphadenitis, and that's all they had said at the time.
Lymphadenitis is an inflammation of the lymph nodes, often associated with a viral infection. The inflamed lymph nodes can be all over the body or localized to one region. Symptoms usually include fatigue and high fevers. The doctor explains that there's no specific treatment for the condition. Amanda will just have to let the infection run its course.
When I left the hospital, I was very angry and very frustrated. I didn't know how I was going to take care of my children or what was going to happen to me.
Over the next week, Amanda's frustration only grows as she gradually loses her appetite and begins dropping weight at a startling pace.
You could see her ribs, you know, when she would take her shirt off. I mean, her bones would stick out. She looked unhealthy.
I knew that I was starting to lose weight. You could see it in my face, definitely my cheekbones and my collarbone.
She was convinced that there was something wrong with her, and it just seemed like the doctor wasn't taking her very seriously.
Unwilling to watch his wife simply waste away, Jim insists that she go back to her primary care physician. Shocked by Amanda's dramatic weight loss and the persistent series of debilitating symptoms, the doctor immediately orders a new round of blood work.
I thought he would definitely give me an answer, and then I'd be able to come home and maybe have some magic cure for what was wrong. But that's not the way it went.
When the findings come in, it's clear that Amanda's white blood cell count is lower than ever. It's a sobering turn of events, as dropping blood levels are often indicative of cancer cells.
Due to my symptoms and the way my blood work came out with the low platelets and blood counts, they felt that I could possibly have lymphoma or leukemia. It's definitely a state of shock. I definitely didn't think at 27, when I just had kids, that I would be dealing with a diagnosis like cancer. In my mind, it was a definite, I have cancer. I have to go through all these things, and what am I going to tell my kids, and you know, what kind of treatments am I going to have? They wanted to admit me immediately into the hospital.
I can remember driving there as fast as I could, on the phone with her. You know, she was crying hysterically and saying, you know, I have cancer, what am I going to do? You know, how could this happen to me?
Terrified by the possibilities, Amanda bravely checks herself into the hospital, and the doctor promptly orders a battery of tests to confirm his hunch.
They started doing test after test after test. I had x-rays done. I had some CAT scans done. They also set me up for a lymph node biopsy and a bone marrow test. I remember Jim walking with me down to the surgery room and just being very scared about just what they were going to find.
She was crying and tears were just streaming down her eyes, and she's saying, you know, what am I going to do? Yeah, it breaks your heart.
Jim never left Mandy's side. He just embraced it to the point of it was, he would lose his best friend.
The worst thing that I was thinking at that point was that I might not have that long to live if the cancer had spread, and I figured that I probably did have cancer, but to what extent?
Then, after 6 agonizing days in the hospital, one of the key test results finally comes in.
I did get the bone marrow biopsy test back, and the results came back negative. It gave us a little bit of hope, but we were still waiting for the lymph node biopsy. And they allowed me to go home to be with my kids until the oncologist called to give me the biopsy results.
A week later, Amanda is at home holding on by a string when her oncologist calls her with the lymph node biopsy findings. It's a day she will never forget.
He actually told her she had the most aggressive form of lymphoma he had ever seen.
What ran through my mind was if it's spreading through my lymph nodes fast, it can spread through my body even faster.
Lymphoma is a type of blood cancer that occurs when lymphocytes, white blood cells that help protect the body from infection and disease, begin behaving abnormally. They may divide faster than normal cells, or they may live longer than they're supposed to. But regardless of the irregularity, lymphoma can be a potentially deadly form of cancer.
I think at that point was one of the lowest points I had. I had to go and tell my family that I might not live through this.
For the past 4 months, Amanda Gray has endured a bizarre constellation of symptoms that her oncologist believes add up to one thing: lymphoma. But before she starts chemotherapy, the doctor does his due diligence and gets a second opinion on the lymph node biopsy from an out-of-state specialist. But when the analysis comes back a week later, it's more shocking than Amanda could have ever imagined.
The doctor called me and suggested that it could possibly be something completely different than lymphoma. I think his mind was spinning as much as ours was.
The oncologist offers to continue working with Amanda, but after the misdiagnosis, she's lost confidence and wants someone new. Then, while searching through medical directories one night, Amanda comes across Dr. Lubomir Sokol, a hematologist who specializes in rare diseases.
She obviously wanted to know what was going on with her, what type of disease she has, was really a diagnosis correct.
As a first step, Dr. Sokol meticulously reviews the entire medical history. Then, Amanda shares some new information that stops the doctor dead in his tracks.
Probably a week before I had my visit with Dr. Sokol, some of my symptoms were starting to go away. My fever was not spiking as high, and my lymph nodes were gradually starting to get smaller.
Dr. Sokol knows that this new development can only mean one thing. He immediately reviews Amanda's previous lymph node biopsy results, hoping to confirm his hunch.
The lymph node showed significant area of necrosis. Necrosis is like dead tissue.
The dead tissue signifies that the body is essentially attacking itself and may be evidence of an autoimmune disorder.
Immune cells which protect us from viruses and also from cancer cells multiply significantly in lymph node. They can be toxic. They can kill our good immune cells, or they can kill our normal tissue and cause damage.
Upon further inspection of the biopsy report, he spots another crucial clue: a number of very specific white blood cells called crescentic histiocytes.
Histiocytes are type of white cells which infiltrate tissue. They participate in immune processes, but some of them can also work as scavenger cell. They go to the areas where they can see necrosis.
Dr. Sokol also notes an extremely low level of neutrophils, another type of white blood cell. Neutrophils help kill and digest alien cells in the body.
What is interesting is absence of neutrophils, because anywhere where you have a lot of dead tissue, neutrophils come and invade that area.
This fact makes one thing clear. While Amanda's white blood cells are behaving badly, they are not cancerous, and she does not have lymphoma. However, the combination of low neutrophils and a high crescentic histiocytes count helps Dr. Sokol confirm Amanda's diagnosis.
All these features led us to a diagnosis of Kikuchi-Fujimoto disease.
Kikuchi-Fujimoto disease, or KFD, is an extremely rare autoimmune disorder that often assaults the lymph nodes. In patients like Amanda, the immune system simply goes haywire and begins attacking itself, ultimately killing off both the lymph node tissue and the neutrophils designed to protect it. Research suggests that in response, the body starts producing crescentic histiocytes like crazy in an attempt to fight off what it believes is an alien infection.
Unfortunately, we still don't know what is cause of a disease, but definitely we know that Kikuchi-Fujimoto disease can cause enlarged lymph nodes, fevers, can cause weight loss, and so forth. There is a lot of dead tissue, necrosis in lymph nodes, which can lead to systemic symptoms.
Dr. Sokol goes on to explain that Amanda's other symptoms of joint pain and fatigue were also a direct result of her damaged lymph nodes.
I think I was a little shocked that I had something so rare, but I think very relieved because it was so much better than lymphoma that I was thrilled that it was anything but cancer.
The good news is Kikuchi-Fujimoto disease is not life-threatening. Ironically, the greatest danger patients face is unnecessary treatments.
This chemotherapy can cause mutations in bone marrow, and later, 20, 30, 50 years later, she could develop acute leukemia.
I was very relieved that I did not have to go through chemotherapy. I was relieved that within a couple months I would be back to my normal self without having to go through anything.
Grateful to finally have a solid diagnosis in hand, Amanda can't help but wonder why none of her many doctors could pinpoint the origin of her symptoms.
I think in any patients like that who present with enlarged lymph nodes, you have to always think about a lymphoma. Another reason is that this disease is extremely rare and not everybody is familiar with this condition. 50 to 80% of all cases described in literature came from Asian countries.
While Dr. Sokol cannot say exactly why Amanda mysteriously came down with Kikuchi-Fujimoto disease, he is confident that she can be treated and will eventually recover.
You can relieve their systemic symptoms with non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. Rarely, patients require treatment with corticosteroids. Prognosis is excellent.
When she got that diagnosis, it was like, oh my goodness, however rare this is, you know, we've been blessed.
A big weight was lifted. Everything you were afraid you were going to lose just got handed back to you, and everything's going to be all right.
Today, Amanda is fully recovered and has plunged back into life as a wife and mother. But the experience has changed her forever.
I think that it's definitely made my family a lot stronger and a lot closer, especially between Jim and I.
She is the same Amanda she was before, with a little extra dressing, you know, just a little something extra in her spirit.
Mandy will say to this day, I cherish every day because tomorrow could be something different. And I think she truly believes that.
I think I definitely learned that I'm a pretty strong person when I want to be, and that you have to keep going no matter what anybody else says to you.